KTN Prime begins now. We begin tonight with a row over the fate of Kenyans abroad seeking to register as voters. The IEBC is now accusing the cabinet of usurping the commission's powers in deciding how to handle the diaspora vote.
IEBC maintains that it is an independent body and will not take instructions from the cabinet. And as KTN's Ashamwilu reports, Kenyans in the diaspora are already threatening to sue the government over the matter.
It was the judiciary's turn to take part in the voter registration process that is well into its second week. Chief Justice Willy Mutunga enlisted himself as a voter in Korogosho. But hundreds of thousands of Kenyans living abroad may not have the chance to register as voters and subsequently vote in their preferred candidates. This is the IEBC's new headache as the election clock ticks away.
On the issue of diaspora, we can't pull it off alone. We require support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of the embassies and the government. And so we as a commission will sit down, look at the cabinet decisions, see our own, talk to our own staff, see whether where we are, whether we can still pull it off.
Even in the face of massive logistical and financial constraints, the IEBC argues that Justice Minister Eugene Wamalwa jumped the gun by announcing that Kenyans in the diaspora would be locked out of the electoral process.
The commission is independent. It doesn't take direction from the cabinet or the minister.
The minister's statement has startled Kenyans in the diaspora. Now they are threatening to take legal action against the government over the matter. They argue that a decision to exclude them from voting would be unconstitutional.
Kenyans outside the country had a say. We always knew we had a say, but this time it's like we have been denied a chance to make that say clear.
They actually had taken us to court when we had issued the circular that we do it in the embassies. They wanted us to do it in more than embassies. And the court actually said these rights are progressive and they are subject to limitations.
They might bring the case to court, so let me not say anything about it.
If this debate on the diaspora vote moves to the court, legal experts argue that the court process could derail the electoral process altogether. The diasporan vote may seem like an uninfluential factor in the 2013 general election. However, for the Kenyans living outside the country's border, this is their chance to reap the fruits of the new constitution, which for the first time grants them their right to vote. Reporting for KTN, I'm Asha Mwilu in Nairobi.
Thank you, Asha. This story is the topic of our big question tonight. We are asking you, do you think the IEBC has the capacity to conduct elections abroad? Do you think the IEBC has the capacity to conduct elections abroad? The SMS number, as always, is 8040. Please send in your comments beginning with a yes or no, plus a brief comment to that number. We'll be reading out your comments as we go along and give you the poll result at the very end of this live newscast. And let's now bring in an expert on the matters of elections. I'm joined in the studio by the Executive Director of the Institute for Education in Democracy, who is also a member of the steering committee for the Elections Observers Group. He is Peter Alingo. Thank you very much, Peter, for coming. And we will begin straight up.
Thank you, Eric.
Do you think the IEBC has the capacity, as we stand today, to conduct and to actually register voters outside Kenya?
When they began, I think there was a demonstration that this is something that can be done. But the worry now, which we are seeing, is that this process has now delayed, and the time left is quite too short for this exercise to happen, effectively in a way that will enable Kenyans outside there to be part of the democratic electoral process. I think the furor that has emerged out of this is extremely unfortunate. One or two things that can be said about it. That one, the minister and the cabinet, really, this is not their remit completely. And I think, and I agree with the chair of the IEBC, that the minister and the cabinet are overstepping their mandate. This is the mandate of the IEBC, which is the constitutional body mandated to do this work, and IEC, in the discharge of its work and mandate, should demonstrate a sense of fierce independence, and that independence must be safeguarded completely.
Hold on, this is just coming to the murky waters. Let's deal with the issue, and the issue here is, looking at where we are, this is the second week of voter registration. With the IEBC, do you think it was actually going to be able to conduct voter registration. Bearing in mind it has never conducted nationwide voter registration before, it has never conducted this kind of an election before, it has never used BVRs before. This is the first time for the IEBC. Was it really going to be able to do this?
We completely believed IEBC when they said this is going to be possible, you know. And when it began, as I said before, this is about planning. It's about adequate planning within the time that is available for this process to happen. BVR is a completely new thing, and it's quite techno-savvy and requires a lot of preparations before it is rolled out. I think these are some of the things which the IEBC should have paid adequate attention to. And indeed, our perception and understanding was that there was sufficient reflection and attention that was paid to this, and that preparatory measures were in place for this to happen.
Then what went wrong?
And what went wrong is what we don't know, and it's for the IEBC to come out and explain to all of us as Kenyans why this has delayed. It is not happening. It did not commence on 19th with the registration of Kenyans who are resident here, and why it will or it will not go on. These are some of the explanations which IEBC owe Kenyans. The Commission owes Kenyans. And I think the fundamental thing here is that we are looking at issues that are very emotive and have may generate other impacts that can derail the elections next year.
Let's come back to Kenya and look at this first week that we saw. The first week, we actually second week, and we know the first week the IEBC missed its target by over 1 million voters, and now we are in the second week. Do you think we're going to be able to hit the 18 million target?
It's a worry that we express, and it's a worry that from time to time we will discuss with the IEBC. And it's also
what do you think is happening? What do you think
I think what is happening is a question of mobilization of Kenyans. And I think that the target of 18 million, if sufficient adequate mobilization is happening at the same time, then we could be able to meet that target. And the worry is, if we are in the first week and we are already seeing a gap of 1 million from the target that we ought to have reached in the first week, then if this is carried forward in the next remaining 3 weeks, then it means that some 4 million Kenyans may end up outside the
not
register.
registering.
And this is unfortunate. So it means one thing, that for the IEBC and for all of us stakeholders, civil society and citizens, we must up the game. This is double time for all of us. We must do double, apply ourselves.
Each as an individual.
Each as an individual. It is not just the responsibility of the IEBC, but all of us as Kenyans, that we know and we understand our civic responsibility and take it serious. Elections is a serious thing. It requires all of us to pay attention and to mobilize ourselves as individuals.
To go out and vote.
And go out and register, and ultimately go out and vote. That is when you can proudly say you are a Kenyan.
Thank you very much, Peter Lingo. We're going to end it there. And thank you for coming. Well, let's remind you again our big question tonight, which is, do you think the IEBC has the capacity to actually conduct voter registration outside Kenya? Do you think the IEBC has the capacity to conduct voter registration outside Kenya? The number again is 8040. Let's get on the campaign front now. And Eldoret North Member of Parliament William Ruto is on a charm offensive in his North Rift backyard to market his alliance with Deputy Prime Minister Uhuru Kenyatta. Ruto began a tour of the region today, and amid opposition from a section of his supporters who want him to quit the alliance. But as KTN Samogina reports on Ruto's dilemma as the Monday deadline draws closer.
With the deal at hand just awaiting signing, Eldoret North MP William Ruto was in his Uasin Gishu County on a drive to popularize the pre-election agreement with the Deputy Prime Minister Uhuru Kenyatta. Ruto's meeting with Kalenjin elders follows what appears to be growing unease about the deal in parts of the region. Flanked by over 10 MPs allied to URP, Ruto outlined 3 reasons for forging a coalition with Uhuru and 3 more why he has rejected a deal with Prime Minister Raila Odinga. First, Ruto says the coalition would bring in the numbers needed to clinch victory in the first round of voting. His argument is that a runoff is slippery ground since it would coincide with the start of the ICC trials. Ruto also say an agreement with Uhuru will be a clear demonstration that communities that have fought in the past can reconcile and coexist.
Tunaungana na chama cha URP katika kutafuta ushirikiano na chama cha TNA na vyama zingine ili tuunde serikali mwaka ujao.
Hii kabla yote ya Kalenjin leo iko hapa. Mwenye anasema hakukuja hapa leo ni nini? Ni mwongo.
On why he rejected Raila Odinga's coalition offer, Ruto alleged that the Prime Minister had betrayed him over the ICC cases. He claims that ODM supported the Hague process that continues to stalk him. Ruto says the Prime Minister showed bad faith when he asked him from the cabinet.
Tutafanya bidii, tutaungana katika barabara ya kuwaunganisha Wakenya na kuhakikisha ya kwamba yale maneno yalitukumba miaka yale mengine tunaweka nyuma yetu.
Ruto heads to Marigat on Thursday to pitch for his deal with Uhuru before marshalling his forces to Eldoret 64 Stadium on Friday. The deal will see the two contest on a joint ticket, but with parties remaining independent. A common symbol will be adopted to represent their joint candidature at the ballot. But as Ruto was making inroads, his URP party was dealt a blow in the region with the defection of Judah Bet to KANU. Bet is running for the governor's seat in Nandi. KANU chairman Gideon Moi says KANU remains open to talks with other parties ahead of next year's elections.
It just shows you what is happening slowly but surely in Rift Valley. The ground is moving, the ground is shifting away from other parties back to KANU.
And amid signs that more coalitions could be in the works, Kenya National Congress presidential aspirant Peter Kenneth and Party of Action presidential aspirant Raphael Tuju met at a Nairobi hotel to initiate talks on a possible pact ahead of the December 4th deadline.
We are seeing of how we can work together, towards giving Kenyans the widest choice to elect from, because Kenyans deserve to have the best choice.
The real problems that we need to be sorting out is the problem of youth unemployment, for example, is the problem of security.
This came as the Alliance Party of Kenya announced it will go it alone in the March 2013 election. The party has broken ranks with Uhuru's TNA. Samogina, KTN Prime.
In Parliament, it emerged that a move by a section of members of Parliament to extend the Monday deadline on coalitions had hit a snag. A majority of members of Parliament have rejected the proposal that would have pushed the deadline to January. The development has put several political groupings on the spot, chief among them the Wiper Democratic Movement. KTN's Erno Cheng has more.
With less than a week to go for political parties to submit pre-election pacts to the Registrar of Political Parties, most of them are still negotiating behind closed doors. With the Uhuru-Ruto deal now all but done, and with the December 4th deadline fast approaching, the spotlight remains firmly on Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka. The VP is keeping his cards close to his chest, and in typical Wiper style, he's not revealing whether he's getting a deal from the Uhuru-Ruto camp or will join Raila in Orange Democratic Movement. According to party sources, Kalonzo had suggested an extension of the deadline for submission of agreements by a month to January 4th in order to give him and others who are undecided some more time to contemplate. Kalonzo is said to have sought help from both Uhuru and Ruto's camp as well as from the ODM camp, but none seemed to have given him an ear. The Uhuru-Ruto camp is comfortable with the date, saying the other houses seem scattered and the deadline may catch them unawares to the advantage of the TNA and URP coalition.
Everybody who wants to do something that is demanded by law must do it within the specified time.
Chapalungu Member of Parliament Isaac Ruto had reportedly proposed to introduce amendments to the Election Act seeking an extension of the deadline, but he appears to have changed his mind, as the proposal has not been tabled with less than a week to the deadline.
We are not supporting an extension, and if any other political party in Parliament brings an extension, I want to categorically say at URP, our parliamentary group meeting had a meeting the previous night, and our minister is here. We have said we are going to oppose it.
The Orange Party, on the other hand, is believed to be in serious talks with Kalonzo and Moses Wetangula's Ford Kenya, but nothing has been concluded. The impact of the December 4th deadline on parties is that whatever agreement that is put on pen and paper must be followed to the letter. For example, if URP and TNA agree to form a coalition and field a single presidential candidate, then the agreement is binding and cannot be changed under any circumstances before the election. But December 4th is not the deadline for presidential hopefuls to declare their running mate. This will be decided before January 18th, exactly 45 days to the election. In case political parties fail to agree on pacts before Tuesday, it does not stop arrangements to be made afterwards, only that the law will not protect such agreements. Those deals will simply pass as gentlemen's agreements. Aaron Ocheng, KTN Prime.
Elsewhere, the National Council of Churches of Kenya is now raising the alarm over the country's security ahead of the March 4th general election.
The council wants the government to recall retired police officers to beef up security during the election period. And as KTN's Wilkis Tanyabo reports, this comes against a backdrop of rising insecurity in parts of the country.
With 96 days to the March 4th election date, the National Council of Churches is raising the alarm over the country's security situation. In the face of the attacks witnessed in parts of the country in recent weeks, church leaders have raised questions as to whether the government can marshal enough troops to provide adequate security before, during and after the elections in order to prevent a repeat of the 2007 post-election chaos.
This is a massive exercise, and we don't think there are sufficient police officers to provide adequate coverage across the country.
Despite the police service stating that except for lack of adequate vehicles they are up to the task, the National Council of Churches recommends that the government recall retired police officers of good standing to reinforce the efforts of police officers during the election period. The council also had a message for Kenyans, urging them to expose those behind attacks on police officers, terming these attacks the pathway to chaos and instability. The warning comes barely a week after 3 Kenya Defence Forces officers were shot dead in Garissa, and 3 weeks after over 31 police officers were killed in Baragoi in an ambush mounted by cattle rustlers. Of the 31, 3 police officers are still missing, and the bodies of 5 other officers are undergoing DNA tests to verify their identities before they are released to their families for burial.
The nature of their bodies demanded that we carry out DNA tests, which is going on, and we hope very soon we'll be able to identify and get to know which body belongs to who.
The Council is now calling upon the National Cohesion and Integration Commission to take stern action against persons found issuing inflammatory statements ahead of the general elections. The National Council of Churches of Kenya says that while the wind of change is blowing across the country, the kind of change that the country will experience after the next general elections will be determined by the choices and the preparations it makes now. Reporting for KTN in Limuru, I'm Wilkis Tanyabo.
Now to that row over Zachary Musengi, the son of the late Cabinet Minister Professor George Saitoti. The Director of Public Prosecutions has now directed Police Commissioner Matthew Itere to investigate claims by a couple from Subukia that Zachary Musengi is their long-lost son. The couple face criminal charges should their claims prove false. Justice Isaac Lenola of the High Court has now extended orders stopping the couple from proceeding with the case that they had filed at the Magistrates Court in Nakuru against Margaret Saitoti. And staying in the courts, controversial businessman Kamlesh Patni has threatened to sue the Law Society of Kenya over the long-running battle for the ownership of duty-free shops at the Kenyan airports. Patni is angered by the Law Society's letter asking its members to surrender all legal documents of Patni pending his case against the government over the airport shops.
The fallout between Kamlesh Patni and the Law Society of Kenya began on the 21st of November when the chairman of LSK, Eric Mutua, agreed to a circular asking LSK members to surrender all of Patni's legal files dating back to August 2011. There is currently a case in court involving Patni and the Kenya Airports Authority over the ownership of all duty-free shops in all Kenyan airports built by KAA. Patni claims that according to a deal made in 1991 between him and top officials of KAA, his World Duty-Free company has exclusive rights to shops in all airports through an indefinite lease. If the court case is ruled in Patni's favor, Kenya would lose billions of shillings in revenue as all collections would go to Patni. Of more immediate concern, however, is the fact that the ongoing case could ground the expansion project at JKIA. Patni is warning in his letter that he will take legal action against LSK unless the directive on his cases is rescinded. By digging into Patni's legal past, the tycoon feels that his constitutional rights will be breached. Kamlesh Patni is back in the limelight and Kenyan taxpayers are involved whether we like it or not. Not only does he have a case against the Kenya Airports Authority, he's also suing the Kenya Central Bank for 5 billion shillings. Catherine Omwando, KTN in Nairobi.
Now, moving away from Patni's case, let's look at a new report out today that suggests that 3 in 4 children in Kenya are victims of either sexual, physical or emotional violence. The report by the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Affairs, however, indicates that a mere 10% of such abuses are ever reported. The findings come in the wake of a chilling investigation by KTN that revealed the widespread abuse of children by their caregivers. Here's KTN's Angel Katusia with the highlights of the 2012 report.
Shocking pictures aired exclusively on KTN a week ago showed children being physically and sexually violated by people they closely relate to, people who are supposed to take care of them when their parents are away, and those images seem to have been borne out by the new report. The report, which is the first by the Ministry of Gender and Children Affairs, suggests that 90% of children in Kenya go through either sexual, physical or emotional violence at least once in their childhood. The report further indicates that 32% of female children and 18% of male children are sexually abused. 66% of female children and 73% of their male counterparts are physically abused. 13% of those interviewed say they had been abused both physically and sexually. 3 in 4 children in Kenya are victims of violence, either sexual, physical or emotional violence. Unfortunately, most of the perpetrators of this violence are people close to them, their parents, teachers and their neighbors.
The survey results depict a sobering picture of pervasive and insidious violence that afflicts the entire country. The scourge of child abuse remains a problem that affects the most modern of cities as well as the most traditional rural communities.
The report indicates that most cases of sexual violence on children are perpetrated by people familiar to them. Boyfriends or girlfriends top the list, followed by neighbors and then relatives. Parents top the list of those who physically abuse their children, followed closely by teachers.
Most violence against children remains hidden or unreported.
Shockingly, 40% of female respondents and half of their male colleagues believe that a woman should tolerate spousal violence. Of concern, however, is the finding that only 10% of child abuse cases are ever reported to authorities. Angel Katusia for KTN Prime.
Let's remind you a big question tonight, which is, do you think the IEBC has the capacity to conduct elections abroad? Do you think the IEBC has the capacity to conduct elections abroad? The number is 8040. Keep these SMSs coming in. Already so far we're seeing it's 40% of you saying yes and 60% saying no. What do you think? Your vote counts.
You're watching KTN Prime, and just ahead we bring you the story of a man's delayed justice for 10 years in Elgeyo Marakwet.
Tweet of the day is brought to you by Risho.
Now to the county of Elgeyo Marakwet for the story of 1 month's 10-year search for justice. 32-year-old Cornelius Kipkorir was paralyzed after he was allegedly shot by an administration police officer. The family says it has spent all its fortunes in the quest for justice and treatment. And as KTN's Mercy Kandia now reports, justice still appears to be a very long way off.
Every shoe he mends, he finishes the work in a day, but the pain he goes through daily, physically and emotionally, is far from over. 32-year-old Cornelius Kipkorir got paralyzed in 2002 after being allegedly shot by an administration police officer. What he says was an extrajudicial shooting.
Ilikuwa kitu saa moja hivi na nilikuwa nakuja sasa. Kufika hapo sasa akaniambia, wewe unaitwa nani? Nikamwambia mimi ni Kipkorir. Akaniambia sasa uko na nini? Nikamwambia sina kitu. Baada kwenda about 2 meters akaniambia duna, akanishoot. Nikamwambia sababu nimefanya nini? Saa hiyo nikasikia tu power ilipitia hapa alafu ikaenda through.
He had just completed his high school and had dreams of joining the military. All this shattered. His mother now takes care of him.
Sasa nikiamkanga asubuhi, mama baada kuniletea chai, nakunywa chai kwa nyumba. Alafu anakuja ananiletea uji kwa mlango. Ananishikia tu mtu kama wheelbarrow, alafu nakuja tu pole pole mpaka nishike gari nipande.
The wheels of life turning for the unexpected.
Sasa wakati vile mama aliona nimenini hivi, bibi yangu sasa akajiendea, mimi akaniacha tu na mtoto.
With limited movement, Kipkorir now relies on this small radio to keep him updated on daily news. His shoe repairing business sustained by neighbors who empathize.
Sasa alipata hii ajali nikauza shamba kwa sababu sikuwa na pesa nyingi.
Kipkorir says the AP who shot him died a month after the incident. He is now suing the state, a case that has been in court since 2006. Pain that he has endured for 6 years, but this is not the only pain. Kipkorir experiences severe pain at intervals of 5 minutes, and in the middle of the interview, we stop. Until the pain subsides. This despite using strong painkillers. This, he says, makes him want justice even faster. Lawyer Titus Bitok says one can sue the state for misuse of state weapons such as the gun.
If the evidence are clear, evidence to state that this was really a government officer was on duty, misused the gun or mishandled the gun, then that means the state has to compensate.
So until he wins the case, every new day is a chance to hope that somehow his started life will be put together again. After living a life of hopelessness since 2002, Cornelius Kipkorir's only hope now lies with the reforms in the judiciary, hoping that the case pending in court will end soon and justice will be served. Mercy Kandia reporting for KTN in Koisungur village, Iten, Elgeyo Marakwet County.
Now, they say justice denied, justice delayed is justice denied, and hoping that the officer can get justice. Let's move to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where M23 rebels in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, who have forced some 500,000 people to flee their homes during 7 months of fighting, have finally reached an agreement and are withdrawing from Goma and Sake. A deal brokered by Uganda saw the rebels start withdrawal from the towns captured since last week from the government troops. The rebels seized Goma on November 20th after Congolese soldiers withdrew and United Nations peacekeepers gave up defending the city. However, UN experts say Rwanda, which is Congo's small but military powerful eastern neighbor, is giving orders to the rebels and supplying arms and recruits, a charge denied by Rwanda. The conflict in eastern Congo, which has big reserves of gold, tin and coltan and ore of rare metals used in making mobile phones, has displaced about 140,000 civilians.
Tulisika kwanja mazungumzo na government ya Kinshasa, lakini mazungumzo ijue shida zetu, tunapigania nini, tunataka nini na tunaenda wapi.
Well, let's take a short break now. Come back. Boni Tunyo with the day's business.
Njoroge told shareholders his last day in office will be June 30th, 2013.
Edward Njoroge, popular as Eddie, has been at the helm of Kenya's only power generating farm for close to 10 years. And with that, he says time is now up for him to exit the farm only 2 days after celebrating his 60th birthday.
I have decided to leave the company with effect from 30th of June next year. The contract that I had, the board had extended my contract up to March 2015. But I've decided this is perhaps the best time to step aside for several reasons.
The soft-spoken and religious Eddie was appointed to the head of the farm in March 2003, soon after the NARC administration came into power. He is best remembered for steering the Kenyan IPO in 2006, raising over 26 billion shillings for use by the farm in upping its generation capacity. At the time, Kenya's generating power was at 780 megawatts compared to the current 1,232 megawatts, with plans to raise it to 1,750 megawatts by the year 2015.
Realizing our vision as the leading responsible energy provider in the region requires large-scale capital investments in assets whose economic life will span many decades.
In his address to shareholders, Eddie noted that a recruitment plan for his successor would officially kick off in January 2013. This is expected to usher in a new head of the listed firm by March 2013. However, Eddie says he is still around.
We do have time now to recruit my replacement. The board has already approved the process of, and this was, they were not doing it because I had announced, they did not even know until this morning. But recently we did approve the procedure for appointment of a new CEO, and that's what will be used.
Eddie's successor will specifically be tasked with increasing Kenya's installed capacity to 3,000 megawatts by the year 2018 to meet the rising demand of power across the country. Joseph Bonyo, KTN Business Today.
The Kenya Bankers Association has published guidelines to aid banking customers on bank procedures. The Consumer Guide to Banking in Kenya comes at a time when the interaction between banks and customers has been deemed exploitative and shrouded in darkness. The umbrella body for banks is also setting up an arbitration committee slated to be in operations next year to resolve emerging differences between banks and their customers.
For many years, the relations between banks and its customers has been frosty at best. This has led to situations where customers have accused their banks of exploiting them by failing to offer full disclosure of banking products. The guidelines introduced by the Kenya Bankers Association outlines the rules of engagement between financial institutions and its customers, with banks now expected to be more transparent. This will include interest rates, penalties, and other bank charges that customers are otherwise not keen on.
As KBA, we recognize that banking is a complicated but necessary business. People have to deal with banks. Banks are regulated, they're governed by rules and regulations, there's contracts to be signed. So there's a lot of legalese legal requirements on both parties. And that's why people say banking is too complicated for them.
This guide was first developed in 2001. And
between 2001 and now, the relationship between the consumer and the bank has completely changed in terms of the products that have come into the market, in terms of generally the evolution of the banking industry over the period. And so we found it necessary to incorporate some of those changes that have come into the industry in guiding the relationship between the customer and its bank.
Discontent customers have in the past had to seek legal redress to challenge the banks in areas where they feel aggrieved. KBA, however, says an arbitration committee has been formulated in consultation with the country's 43 banks. The committee will be the initial channel for customers to have their complaints heard and resolved.
If we can have a mechanism where the number of cases that eventually boil down to the courts of law can be reduced, that will go a long way in saving both the consumer and the bank a lot of money, and generally make the relationship much more smoother.
The guidelines will be key to restoring the confidence people have with their banks. Banks, however, have the luxury of implementing the guidelines to suit their banking strategies. Michael Karanja, KTN Business Today.
President Mwai Kibaki has called for better partnership between the East African states if they are to leverage from the ongoing East African economic integration. Now, President Kibaki spoke as he led other heads of state at the official opening of the Arusha-Namanga Athi River Road, built by collaborative efforts from the governments of Kenya and Tanzania. Philip Keitani is back from Arusha with the following report.
The East African Community heads of state have said that the East African Community integration process can be strengthened through the improvement of its infrastructure, including roads, rail systems and energy, by increasing partnership in infrastructure development projects among member states.
Some of these achievements include: 1. Enlargement of the East African membership in the year 2007 by the admission of the republics of Rwanda and Burundi. 2. Launch of regional infrastructure and other development projects. And 3. Realization of a fully fledged customs union.
President Kibaki has called for the elimination of all non-tariff barriers through the installation of legal binding mechanisms, were echoed by other heads of state at the official opening of the Arusha-Namanga Athi River Road in Kenya.
And community is beneficial to the people of East Africa. It is through joint efforts undertaken by our two countries, two governments, and the auspices of the East African community that we were able to get money from the African Development Bank and the government of Japan to do the Athi River Namanga Arusha road that we are inaugurating today.
Earlier on in Arusha, Tanzania, the heads of state presided over the official opening of the East African Community headquarters, amongst other milestones being the coming into effect of the East African Custom Union, Common Market Protocol, and the African Court of Justice. Today's official opening of the East African Community headquarters here in Arusha, Tanzania, just 2 years after the East African Common Market Protocol came into place, is a clear indication that the 5 East African member states are fully committed to the implementation of the integration process. The headquarters sits on a 10-acre piece of land bought by the government of Tanzania at a cost of 10 million euros, with an additional grant of 14 million euros from the government of Germany that went into its construction. Philip Keitani reporting for KTN.
The team rules and taking a French leave after receiving the allowances paid to the team late yesterday. Kenya Football Federation Chairman Sam Nyamoya has revealed to KTN that the two later came back in the morning with female company into the official team hostel. The federation has also suspended the two players indefinitely, and Nyamoya has warned that they stare a lengthy ban from national duty. AFC Leopards Paul Were and Gor Mahia's Kevin Omondi are expected back into the country tomorrow morning. Kenya will play Ethiopia in the last group match of the Sekafa tournament. KCB football team has withdrawn the services of its 2 senior coaches and has begun a process to replace the 2. The team is also expected to release about 5 players and is currently holding trials for prospective players.
Bankers KCB got rid of their head coach and the entire technical bench after a poor 2012 season. They finished 10th in the log, 2 places below the prestigious top 8 bracket, and the Bankers management have begun their recruitment drive to bolster their squad, even as they look to replace the entire technical bench. The club will be greatly focusing on improving its defense department and the goalkeeping area.
Uzuri ya pila ndo tutampatia nugu kadi ama tutamsaini nao. Kama atakuwa hajafikia hiyo standard tunataka, itabidi arudi tu county tena jaribu next season.
Ndio unaweza ona vile sasa ligi yetu imechangamka. Watu wako neo morale, tunataka kucheza ball, tunapenda ball.
Contrary to KCB's expectations, a bulk of the players who turned out for the trials belong to the lower leagues, a matter the club feels might be a daunting task since the Premier League is very competitive. Out of the close to 50 players who turned up for the trials, less than 10 are seasoned Premier League players.
League imekuwa competitive sana. Na hawezi catch up na hizo timu kama Gor, Tusker, quality yao iko juu sana.
Ligi lazima uwe na mazoezi ya ligi. Lazima uwe umecheza ligi poa. Ndio pia kwa sababu ligi iko juu kuliko nini zingine.
The trials, which began on Monday, will end this Friday. It is that time of the year once again when clubs are busy trying to beef up their squads in readiness for the tough season ahead come the year 2013. Victor Ogale, KTN at the KCB training grounds, Nairobi.
8 from Arusha, Tanzania.